everyone, I am back. I apologize for the delay in getting this video out to you guys, but November has been crazy for me, for both good and bad reasons. But I'm back now, and I hope you all had a great Thanksgiving holiday. Except for my Giants losing to the Cowboys, I had a pretty good Thanksgiving as well. It was fun to have a nice dinner with family, so good stuff all around there. But as far as the future of this channel and videos that are going to be coming out, Undertaker Best and Worst. Parts 2 and 3 have been filmed, I just haven't edited them yet, but those will be coming in the next couple of weeks. I was hoping to get the whole series done before Survivor Series, but considering Survivor Series is later today, not going to happen. So, but you'll be getting Undertaker's Part 2 and 3 within the next couple of weeks. The next heel or face video has not been filmed, but the subject has been selected. It is Bret the Hitman Hart, and I will film that and then put up a poll to determine the next subject for the next heel or face video when that video goes up. And I also want to do my Batman the Animated Series tribute that I've been talking about all year, and I just haven't gotten around to actually finalizing how I want to do it yet. And now with the tragic passing of Kevin Conroy, that gives me a little bit more of an added incentive to do it. But that one's probably not going to come until closer to 2020, or into 2023, I should say. But I still want to do that video. It's just I haven't gotten around to how I'm going to do it yet. Maybe it's just as simple as me like just turning the camera on and just going with it. But in any case, we've got Survivor Series War Games later today. I'm going to try and watch that show. We'll see how it goes. And we had Full Gear last week, a show that I enjoyed overall. I felt like most AEW shows, it was overly long and a little bit too bloated. That undercut what would have been a really good show, but, you know, there were severe pacing issues because they tried to cram too much and too many matches and too many big spots into the show, and it just became exhausting by the end of it. And in the end, it was like, I was just happy to see MJF win the title. That was worth it. You know, all the big things that they tried to do in every single match, and really it was MJF's title win and the return of the Elite that were really the major positives to come out of the show. But there is one aspect of AEW that I wanted to talk about and make the main subject of this video, and that is their championship situation. The number of belts that they currently feature on AEW programming, which is a lot. It is too much. Many people have had this criticism, and some AEW defenders have said, oh, well, you know, the Ring of Honor belts don't count. And I'm like, oh, they count. They are such a huge fixture of AEW programming. They absolutely count. We can talk about the AAA titles that show up from time to time and the New Japan titles that show up from time to time, but the ROH titles, those absolutely count towards AEW's number of belts because they are featured so heavily. I was just watching Rampage, and opening match, ROH tag title match. Next segment, ROH World Champion Chris Jericho, who's like one of the main storylines going in the company right now, is him defending the ROH World Championship. It's a main fixture of AEW programming. And then later in the show, they brought out the ROH Women's Champion. So, you know, what the heck do you mean that the ROH belts don't count? They are so, like, integral to AEW. And only adds to the sheer number of championships that they have, which, as I've said before, is too many. Now, by my count, the number of championships that you can consider as like AEW titles. There's the world title, there's the All-Atlantic title, there's the TNT title, there's the women's title, the TBS title, there's the tag title, and there's the trios title, and then there's Hook's belt, the FTW title, and then you've got the ROH world title, you've got the ROH TV title, that's 10 by my count. You've got the ROH Pure title, the ROH Tag titles, ROH Women's title, and the ROH Six-Man Tag titles, because of course they need those. So by my count, that is 14 championships. And again, I'm not even counting the AAA belts that show up and the New Japan belts that show up. Just the ROH and AEW titles that are regularly featured on AEW programming. And it's like, that's a lot of titles. That is quite a lot. So how do you address this issue? Because right now, having so many belts floating around in the company, it just makes things more confusing because you don't know which titles are important. Again, the example I always go back to, when I was a kid, in WWF programming, you had the world title, the IC title, and the tag titles, and that was it. Some would say that's too few, but for the roster that they had back then, that was perfect. And yeah, there were other belts floating around from time to time, like the women's title and the women's tag titles, which never really ascended to any kind of significant level, at least not at that point in time. When I started watching, the women's title really peaked with Cyndi Lauper, and then it just kind of tapered off and sadly became kind of a nothing belt. But really in WWF, it was those three main titles that were the main focus, and being a champion actually meant something and carried some weight, because it's if there's fewer opportunities to win a belt, then it means more when you have one. This is basic psychology. And even in the Monday Night Wars period, where they were adding more belts and things, WCW had, they had the world title, U.S. title, TV title, cruiserweight title. They had a women's title floating around from time to time, but again, they never really knew what to do with it. And they had the tag titles. Seems like a lot, but for that massive roster, it actually wasn't that much at all. And I think all the belts were different enough to kind of stand on their own. Kind of the same thing in WWE at the time, where you had the world title, IC title, European title, which was essentially their TV title. You had the tag titles, women's title that they brought back, and the light heavyweight title, which nobody cared about. And then they brought in the hardcore title. Again, that seems like a lot of belts, but they managed to make it work for the rosters that they had, for reasons that I'm going to elaborate on in a little bit. But, and the whole "there's too many titles" complaint is something that I've been saying about WWE for years now, especially with the brand split and the way that they've handled that. A problem that, quite honestly, they've addressed fairly well recently, since it started with the Usos and Roman Reigns winning all the tag titles and the two world titles and just consolidating all of that, which makes it a lot less complicated, as with all the different belts floating around. And they could go even further with that, and consolidating more of those championships. It also helps that they got rid of the 24/7 title. That was long overdue. Thank God, good riddance. So WWE is taking steps to improving their championship situation. But AEW seems to just keep adding more and more and more, and it's like, well, what the hell do you do with all of these title belts? I mean, if you put me in charge of AEW and asked me to handle all of these championship situations, have a plan for each champion and contenders for each championship, I would go absolutely insane trying to map all this out. But the easy answer is to unify a bunch of belts, or at the very least separate AEW and ROH into two separate brands, and have a clear-cut separation there that prevents things from getting too muddied. But for this video, I've decided, okay, the easy answer is to unify a bunch of belts and drop a few belts and be done with it, and I believe I've talked about that in a previous video, but I'm going to take a different approach here. I'm going to say, I'm going to create this hypothetical situation where I work for AEW and I have control over the championship belts, but Tony Khan tells me you cannot remove any championships. You have to work with the belts that we have and try to be creative with that in that system. I would probably go home and cry myself to sleep that night, because trying to come up with a plan for all of that stuff would just drive me crazy. But step one in developing a plan for every title is defining the boundaries and the purpose of each title. So, and this is where I go back to Attitude Era WWF and talking about all the different championships that they had, which was quite a few. But they made it work because there was a clear identity for each championship. You had the world title, which was the big belt. We all knew that. Women's title, only women compete for it. We know that. Hardcore title, every title match is a hardcore match, and then they added the 24/7 rule, which got stupid, but at least there's an understanding, and that's one thing I'll give the 24/7 title. There's an understanding of how the belt works. Now, why anybody would want that belt is anybody's guess, but there you go. There was a clear definition for what hardcore title matches were supposed to be. You had the tag title, which again, that's the, defended in the tag division. Light heavyweight title defended by light heavyweights, and there's a weight limit on that. So there was enough of an identity for each title to where they were able to make that number of championships work for them. And I would try to take that approach with AEW and how they handle all of their championships. Now, in regards to Ring of Honor, my plan right off the bat would be like, all right, Tony, take one of the internet shows. Dark, and do you really need AEW Dark and Dark Elevation? Is that something that you really, really need? Do you need 2 weekly episodes of Dark every single week? My answer would be no. I would hope. It's just redundant at that point. A lot of the same people show up on both shows anyway, so it's not like they're that different from each other. So I would take one of those internet shows. Either, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they film some in Orlando, and they film another show after each episode of Dynamite. I'd be like, okay, we're taking one of those shows, and we're branding it as Ring of Honor. Like, all you have to do, if you give it to the show that's taped after Dynamite, all you have to do is change the ring aprons and the banners, and you're good. If it's the one that's taped in Orlando, then you really just have to change the banners and just film the show as is. It shouldn't be that much of a change. They've got all the ROH talents floating around anyway, but I think having a clear Ring of Honor weekly product would not only help out with these Ring of Honor pay-per-views that they're doing for whatever reason, when Ring of Honor isn't really much of an entity these days, but whatever, they're doing pay-per-views, they're doing Final Battle this year. Use that as a weekly Ring of Honor show, define a Ring of Honor roster, and put the Ring of Honor titles on that internet show. Again, if you can't get it on cable or you can't get it on some kind of smaller station somewhere, at least take one of the internet shows and put it on there. I think that would help create a division between the Ring of Honor titles and the AEW titles. You wouldn't have 900 champions floating around. And if you want, you can have, like, okay, you want Jericho to be world champion, you want FTR to be the tag champs. That's fine. But probably don't have them defend Ring of Honor championships on AEW programming unless there's some kind of major storyline purpose for doing so. Keep Ring of Honor titles a very, very minimal element of Dynamite and Rampage. And now I've had some people come up with the idea of turning Rampage into a Ring of Honor show. Something I wouldn't be opposed to that either, quite honestly, because having Dynamite and then having Dynamite Jr. just 2 nights later really kind of throws a few things out of whack for me. And I was against them having that show in the first place. But if they wanted to rebrand that as Ring of Honor, I'd be okay with that. Just to kind of create 2 different shows that don't continue storylines from each other and kind of act as their own separate entities. It makes it feel a lot less bloated and actually makes me more excited for Dynamite on a weekly basis because I'm not being bombarded with constant AEW content. But as far as the title situation goes, you take those Ring of Honor belts, World, Pure, TV, Tag, Women's, 6-man, which they need to have for some reason. Keep them all on the Ring of Honor show and have them only be defended on the Ring of Honor shows. And again, have a clear-cut Ring of Honor roster and build all of your storylines for those championships appropriately on the Ring of Honor show, whether it be Rampage or whether it be the internet show. Do it that way and have a clear division there. It's like this is defended on Ring of Honor programming and the other belts are defended on AEW programming. And that'll be the starting point right there. So that handles all of the Ring of Honor championships right now. Now, and in regards to the Ring of Honor titles, it's like you have a clear definition of what the women's title is, what the tag title is, what the 6-man tag titles are, although I don't think anybody cares that they exist. The only real problem is the TV title, which seems like a weird one to have when you already have the world title and the pure title as kind of the secondary one. And the pure title I actually really like because pure title matches are wrestled under a different rule structure. So there's actually an identity for that championship that a lot of the other belts don't have. So the pure title seems well defined to me. It's like, all right, if you're wrestling for the pure title, you're wrestling under these rules and these circumstances. And there's a clear definition there that makes sense and gives an identity to that belt. And it attracts certain wrestlers, like the more technical guys, to fight for that title. So there's a clear identity and understanding of that championship, something that a lot of the belts in AEW are lacking. As for the TV title, I would probably initiate some kind of a time limit on that one, like the classic like 15-minute time limit, to help make that belt a little bit different from the other singles titles. But that's one idea. In the sea of Ring of Honor championships, that might be the way to go to help the TV title stand out. And you get the quicker, faster-paced matches for the TV title because there's a shorter time limit. And anybody that wrestles for that belt adjusts their strategies accordingly to fit within that shorter 15-minute time frame. So that's my idea with the Ring of Honor titles, and that's how you handle all of them. Now, you get into the belts in AEW programming, as I've defined it. That leaves us with the World title, the All-Atlantic title, the TNT title, the Women's title, the TBS title, this is still a lot, the Tag titles, the Trios titles, and Hook's FTW Championship. So let's start with the FTW title and trying to define what that thing is. So they keep claiming it's a non-sanctioned title, and yet they keep stats for it. They announce title matches, and it's not regularly defended, but it's defended on AEW programming like any other title would be. So what is it about the FTW title that isn't like any other belt that's on that show? I think personally, when I think of the non-sanctioned championships, immediately I think of the $1 Million title, which is the best non-sanctioned title of all time. It was only defended in situations where Ted DiBiase had no other choice but to defend it. It was usually in a really hot and heated storyline where the $1 Million title became an appropriate prize in that situation. That would be the feud with Jake Roberts and the feud with Virgil for the matches at WrestleMania 6 and SummerSlam 1991, respectively. And as far as I know, those are some of the only $1 Million title matches to ever happen when DiBiase had it. NXT brought it back and did certain things with it, and Ted DiBiase Jr. had it for a while and did certain things with it. But when Ted DiBiase created the title and had it originally, I think his only title matches were the one with Jake at WrestleMania 6, the one with Virgil at SummerSlam 91, and the match that he had against Virgil where he won the $1 Million title back. I forget what show that was. I think it was like that Survivor Series special, like before Survivor Series 91, they would do like a TV special for some of the pay-per-views, and I think, if memory serves me right, DiBiase won the belt back on that show, the one preceding Survivor Series 91. But there were not many $1 Million championship matches. It was only defended as a piece of property that was put on the line by the guy holding the belt. So it was a prop for DiBiase more than anything else. That felt like it mattered because it mattered to that specific character. So when Virgil beat him at SummerSlam, it was gratifying because everybody hated DiBiase, and that was just the ultimate way to humiliate him. It was not treated as an actual championship. So I would treat the FTW title in a similar way with Hook, where that belt is just Hook's prop and nothing more. It should not be defended. It should not be, unless there's a hot storyline that calls for it, where a heel really, really wants to get under Hook's skin and really, really wants to take that belt away from him and humiliate his family legacy and mock Taz or whatever it is they want to do with that. But that belt should be Hook's prop and nothing more. And that's all it should be. It should be something that Hook wears to the ring, and that is it. And it shouldn't be any more complicated than that. It should be treated as a non-sanctioned title, which means it is not defended and it is not treated with any kind of statistics or any kind of promotion from AEW as a major title that which they're prone to doing, while in the same breath saying that it is a non-sanctioned title, but they don't treat it like one. It's just a bizarre setup. So I would really with the FTW title, I would lean into it's a non-sanctioned title by not defending it and making title matches extremely rare and only in storyline situations where it means something to Hook to defend the belt in that situation. And again, it should be treated like a piece of property of Hook and nothing more than that. I think anything more than that, you're kind of killing what the FTW title is supposed to be. So, that's one down. The next one I'm going to address are the two tag titles. The straight-up AEW tag titles currently held by the Acclaimed, and the Trios titles currently held by Death Triangle, locked into a best-of-7 series with the Elite to determine who will be the Trios champions. Now, the way I would kind of differentiate these two titles, because essentially you have two sets of tag titles running around. The Trios format adds 2 extra guys to the proceedings, but overall, you basically have 2 sets of tag titles, which overcomplicates things and prevents either division from having a lot of depth, because that requires more bodies to have more competition for both divisions, and it's just kind of a mess. So, I can't really solve that problem right now. That's an AEW issue, even though their roster is bloated right now. It's like, I doubt that they could ever fill like a full trios division, because that would just be so difficult to do. But if they insist on having this belt, my method of differentiating between the two would be to have them wrestled under different rule structures. I think the tag team title should be the FTR style tag team wrestling, where you follow the rules, you keep the matches traditional, old school NWA style tag team wrestling, and adhere to those rules and be old school tag team matches, again, in the style of FTR, I think, and have a rule structure that reflects that, and then follow that rule structure. That should be the identity of the tag team championship. The Trios Championship should follow Lucha Libre AAA type of rules, where it's just flying all over the ring, and if you fall out of the ring, that's as good as a tag, and then another guy can jump in and do that. And that one should be a little bit more loosey-goosey with its rules and allow for a lot of action. And those can be the Spot Fest, multi-man, car wreck style of matches. That's what those matches can be. And have those rules specifically lined up for both tag team divisions, so that wrestling for the tag titles and wrestling for the trios titles is not the exact same thing, and you're not seeing the exact same match both times. You're seeing different rule structures applied for both tag team divisions, and I think that would help differentiate the divisions, give both sets of titles purpose and identity, which is what I'm trying to do, because and again, this thinking comes back from the Monday Night Wars, where you had all these different championships floating around, but there were different rules for each belt, like the hardcore title and the light heavyweight title, and restrictions, and certain people could go for certain belts because of those things. And it really helped give those championships a little bit more purpose and allow guys to have their own storylines for smaller belts, like D'Lo Brown for the European title. That felt like his belt. And it was the 3rd-tier championship, but I always wanted to see D'Lo Brown compete for that belt, because I loved him. I was a big mark for D'Lo back in the day. And I think if you do have more restrictions on how titles are defended, how they're wrestled for, who can fight for them, I think that creates more exciting possibilities, even, allowing for divisions to form when you have to put certain people with certain belts and things. And there can be going back and forth. You don't have to lock people into one belt division forever, but if you give these titles their own identities and their own rule structures and restrictions and things like that, I think it helps to better define what those championships are all about, and makes them more interesting for the viewers and easier to understand for the viewers. So that's how I would handle the 2 tag team divisions. Now, for the women's divisions, and again, going into the whole identity thing, what is the difference between the AEW women's title and the TBS title? There really is no difference. They're both essentially the same belt. Same championship, same division, same thing. It's just a singles title only competed for by women. There's no real difference between the two. And I'll talk about this a little bit more when I talk about the TNT championship, but one idea that I have to help the TBS title be differentiated from the main women's title is that the TBS title should only be defended on TBS, meaning Dynamite or any Battle of the Belts specials that they do. I think all of the Battle of the Belts have been on TNT, but still. The TBS title should not be defended on pay-per-view, should not be defended on Rampage, should not be defended on Dark or anything like that. It should only be defended on TBS. And I think what you could do, again, this kind of ties into what a similar plan for what I have for the TNT Championship, but I think if you make that belt channel exclusive, you can then once a month build up to a monthly TBS title match and make that match a special attraction, which I think would be very beneficial to Jade Cargill, who, say whatever you want about her in-ring ability. I think she's still green and still growing and developing, but she looks like a megastar. I mean, when she came out of the pay-per-view dressed up like Chitara, she looked absolutely incredible. I mean, she just... we're grading, I remember that shoot interview with Bret Hart where he talked about the 10 points in each class. It's like looks, mic skills, and technical ability. Scoring Jade Cargill on looks, she's a 10. I mean, she just looks like a complete brick shithouse and a total 5-star athlete. She looks amazing. And I think she would benefit from making her title defenses on TV a special attraction that you get once a month. Any reason to tune into a specific episode of Dynamite. It's like, oh, it's that time of the month where Jade Cargill is going to wrestle and defend her championship against a contender that they theoretically would have built up over the course of the previous month. Maybe even have a TBS contenders match at the pay-per-view with the understanding that on the Dynamite following the pay-per-view, that person is going to face Jade Cargill. And that's probably how I would handle the TBS title. It differentiates it from the main women's title, puts a restriction on the TBS title that makes it more of a special attraction for Dynamite and AEW programming as a whole, because it's like you're not going to see it on pay-per-view, you're not going to see it on Rampage, you're not going to see it on TNT, any of the Battle of the Belt specials. You're only going to see this title defended on TBS, this once a month, on a specific episode of Dynamite. That's how I would do it, and that was my idea. Now, this leads into what I said about where we're going into the men's singles title, talking about the TNT title. I think there should be a similar restriction in place, and I think Wardlow would have greatly benefited from this. Kind of that, it's that time of the month where Wardlow's going to defend the TNT Championship, which should only be defended on TNT, which would be Rampage or the Battle of the Belt specials. Don't defend it on pay-per-view, don't defend it on Dynamite. Let Wardlow kind of be the king of Rampage, and let that kind of be his show, where he, his title matches and whoever fights for him in those title matches kind of drives the storylines for Rampage. Now, obviously Wardlow is not the TNT champion at this moment. It is currently Samoa Joe, a decision that I disagreed with. Coming out of Full Gear, I didn't think Joe should be winning the belt off of Wardlow at this point in time, but Wardlow's probably going to get, I would hope, would get the TNT title back, but we'll see. They'll do a one-on-one match between them, and then Wardlow will, pray to God, get the belt back. But for right now, I would treat the TNT Championship like it is an exclusive, a channel exclusive belt where it's only defended on TNT. And another thing I would add to that, and you've seen it with some of the recent Wardlow matches, like the pay-per-view match with Hobbs thrown in and Samoa Joe thrown in. And you have all these big guys floating around in AEW now, like Luchasaurus, like Lance Archer, like Brian Cage. And this is kind of shaping the TNT title. And I think a lot of it is because of Wardlow, and they wanted to give him bigger challenges moving forward. But Jake Hager would be another perfect example for what I'm about to say. But you've got these big guys and these muscular guys and these big Haas-type guys that lay in their shots and just beat the shit out of each other. That could be an opportunity to reshape the TNT title division as kind of like the strongman heavyweight division, kind of like what the Never Openweight title has been for New Japan when they were doing like the Makabe Ishii matches, where it's just that's the hard-hitting heavyweight division. So if you want to see heavyweights, that's the way to go for the TNT Championship. Let that be the straight-up heavyweight strongman division. And that's another element to help differentiate some of these titles. Implement weight classes. I know that's scary for some people because, like, you could trap somebody in a cruiserweight division. But, in WCW it showed that, there were some guys that maybe got hampered by being labeled a cruiserweight. It kept them from moving further up the card, the guys like Eddie and Jericho. But then there are other guys like Ultimo Dragon who could, Dean Malenko and even Rey Mysterio who could forge an entire career in a cruiserweight division like that. And maybe having some kind of a weight limit for the TNT title where it's specifically like the strongman heavyweight belt, that could be the way to go, and creating its own heavyweight division, because we've reached this age now where, back in the late 90s, the high flyer types were the more special ones because not everybody could do a lot of the athletic things that they could do. And the heavyweights were kind of the big guys were kind of the dime a dozen. Now we're at this point where it's flipped, where, I said flipped, all the high-flying flippity-flop guys are like the dime a dozen because everybody does it. And the heavyweights are kind of like the rarity, and the big muscled up, jacked up dudes that just beat the crap out of people. Those have become the rarity, and those feel more special now. So maybe giving them their own division would probably be the way to go, and using the TNT title and Wardlow as the centerpiece of that division would probably be, again, give a nice attraction to Rampage, and let the TNT title be exclusive to that channel, and see if you can make something out of that. Again, put restrictions on the title, make it more of a special occasion. And again, kind of what I talked about with the TBS title and Jade Cargill. Let that monthly title match on, I'm just going to keep saying Rampage, on Rampage feel like a big deal. You can have contenders matches at the pay-per-view, and you can still have Wardlow and Jade wrestle at the pay-per-view, just don't defend the title. And let those title matches feel like special occasions that you have to wait for, and you can only see in certain situations in certain places, rather than just defending them willy-nilly on a show that already has 14 title matches and nobody cares. Try and, again, hold back, pull back, less is more. I think that is the way to go, to try and help with this situation. Of course, we're up to me. I'd have dropped half the belts by now anyway, but again, this is a hypothetical situation where I'm trying to make all of these championships work. So that's how I would handle the TNT title. The All Atlantic title, which I think many have said is the stupidest title that that AEW has come up with so far. Now, what I would do with this title is similar to how New Japan handles the United States title, or their version of the United States title, where it's kind of the traveler's belt, and like the title holder will go outside of the promotion and outside of the country and defend it around the world, and kind of let it be the traveler's belt and the ambassador's belt, where the ambassador for AEW is the one carrying that belt, and he's traveling all over the world defending it, which is kind of what Pac was doing initially, and then he lost the title to Orange Cassidy. And this is the other caveat to that, where it's like, if it's going to be defended on AEW programming, whether that be on pay-per-view or Dynamite or Rampage or whatever, it has to be against a guy who is an outsider to AEW. So there's a clear-cut understanding that this belt is only defended outside of the country, or if it's inside the United States of America, it's against somebody who's coming from outside of the country to challenge for that belt, and allows for situations like the Orange Cassidy-Shibata match that recently happened. And I would also say, let that be the only title that the outsiders get to go for, because, and the match that Jericho and Ishii had was a hard-hitting, great match overall. But, AEW does a lot of those matches where a New Japan star will come in and have a match with somebody for a random title, and they'll do a title match and blah, 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 blah. They did a whole pay-per-view for it. The All-Atlantic title should be the only title that these outsiders, these foreign superstars, can compete for if they want to get a foothold in AEW. And if you win the AEW title and you're, let's say, Kazuchika Okada or something like that, you are automatically made a member of the AEW roster, and that opens up the door for you to go for the world title and things like that. So that's how I would handle the All-Atlantic title. It's the Ambassador's belt, it's the World Traveler's belt, and it's also a gateway for outsiders to get onto the AEW roster if they win said championship. So treat it like that, and I think that would be the way to go. We'll be seeing a lot less All-Atlantic title matches because of that, which again is probably a good thing, because AEW has too many belts, and trying to, constantly doing shows where there's 3, 4, 5 title matches, it's just way too much. And honestly, it's made Battle of the Belts, which I know they want that to be kind of their version of Clash of the Champions, but it really means nothing when you do 4 title matches a week, it seems. A show that's nothing but title matches really doesn't mean anything. It's like, isn't that every show you do anyway? who cares? And, you look at these Battle of the Belts they've done, there's never been a title change at any of them. There was a vacant title that was decided, but other than that, these shows feel utterly, utterly pointless. So I'm trying to come up with the ideas to help the belts mean more, give them an identity, give them purpose, so that, AEW programming, whenever they do these title matches, whether it be Dynamite, Rampage, Dark, or Battle of the Belts, it'll actually mean something. And then finally you have the AEW World title, which doesn't need to change. It's completely fine. They've got it on MJF, which I'm happy with, and most of the wrestling world is happy with. So that is all good. So that is my plan on how to handle the AEW Ring of Honor Championship situation. And again, if you're not going to get rid of any of these titles, which again, that would be my first plan. A lot of those things would definitely go. All Atlantic title, gone. A Ring of Honor 6-man title, gone. Tag titles, trios titles, merge them. I would do a women's title, TBS title, merge them. There's just too many belts floating around. But if you're going to work with all these belts, this is how I would do it. That's how I would do it. You would separate AEW and Ring of Honor, similar to how NXT is kind of separated from Raw and SmackDown. And give these belts the right level of identity and restrictions to keep them from feeling like every other belt in the show. Because right now, many of the titles feel like they're exactly the same and there is no identity, and it's just another belt being held by somebody on a show where half the roster has belts, so nobody really cares, and none of it's really all that special. And watching that episode of Dark Side of the Ring, talking about the UWF and Herb Abrams and all that other stuff, and all the different championships that he cooked up, I feel like Tony Khan is, at least in terms of the championships and the number of championships, I feel like Tony Khan has surpassed the absurdity of Herb Abrams, at least in that regard. But that's my take on the matter. So I've rambled on long enough. Hopefully you all enjoyed this video, and if you want to see more from me, be sure to check out the videos on this channel. The last video I posted is part 1 of my Undertaker series, Best and Worst Through the Years, and parts 2 and 3 will be coming soon. If you want to see more from me, be sure to hit the little bell icon so you get notified when I post new videos, and be sure to like and subscribe, and follow me on Twitter. The link is in the description. But that is all I have for you now. Thanks again, everybody, for watching, and I will see you all later.